So more exciting information to go over. We just had a director's take yesterday, and then another director's, well, not a director's take, but more information, another blog post today talking a lot about the defense matrix stuff. There's a lot to talk about here. We're going to go over each point in detail. I would describe this as more of a mixed bag, but definitely a positive mixed bag, especially with the second half of what we're going to be discussing today, but still a couple of question marks about some of the hero changes, and we're going to be taking a look at those. Now, we don't exactly have the full numbers on all of these, but there was a director's take yesterday where they're talking about a couple of the changes that are happening to Venture, support, tank, a lot of other things. I'm not going to go over the details of Venture, besides the important stuff that they're looking to bring Venture in to soon. Not as many changes to the kit, but we're going to be bringing them in relatively soon, so that's fine. Two things in particular they talk about is the drill dash and clobber. So if you've played any Venture in the playtest trials, you notice that there was a real propensity for crazy burst damage. And we already know with this development team that a lot of the Season 9 changes were an attempt to reduce the impact of burst damage and overall sustain as a whole. So it's like finding the balance where we don't need burst healing, we don't need burst damage as much. And I think that the changes that we see here with the drill dash and clobber are consistent with that theme here. One of them is going to be shifting some of the burst damage from drill dash and clobber, the melee, into damage over time. So this means that it does the same amount of damage overall, but the window of doing your primary fire into your drill dash and your primary fire into your melee cancel, there's like different ways of animation canceling things. It's not able to be doing this massive burst damage in one tight window. It's going to be basically extending the window out just a little bit. So the propensity, the total amount of damage that you do is the same, but there's a little bit more counterplay to response, whether it's getting healing or avoiding it or fighting back and so on. And I think that's a reasonably decent change. We'll have to kind of see how this works in actual execution, but overall seems to be, again, consistent with their philosophy of how they're approaching things. Next, we're going to be looking at the vertical knockback of tectonic shock. In terms of how much it actually bumps you up. I was not disappointed, but I'm a little bit surprised to see more from Venture. If you guys can check out actually I'll link my Venture video in the description, but there's some other quality of life stuff, whether it's with the way that the ultimate felt, the way that the drill dash is used underground, and the way that that timer is used can feel a little clunky. I hope that they continue to look at those changes, but overall, this seems pretty reasonable. And the exciting news is that it sounds like Venture was overall at least surface level balanced character, and maybe something that's going to be coming into competitive sooner rather than later for the competitive scene, which is, I think, it'd be pretty good. And it's also good news for the overall design of the character. A couple of other hero changes, and these are really important. Junker Queen's Carnage, Reinhardt's Earth Shatter are going to be buffed to better match the Season 9 thing. And this is something that we talked about since literally the Season 9 patch notes were leaked on stream before even Season 9 went live. We were talking about what are they going to do with the fact that things like Carnage and Reinhardt's Earth Shatter, they're not aim-based, so they don't really benefit from the projectile size increases. So should those non-aim damage sources be buffed? Some of those things have kind of lagged behind. These are the two big ones that are lagging behind. There's one more, which is the Winston alternate fire. So I hope that that's something that's coming up as well, but this is a good change. I'm glad to see that these things are happening. It's about darn time, especially because these are two of, I think, the healthier tanks for the game, more skill-based tanks in the game. And listen, if we're ever going to have a tank meta, Winston, Junker Queen, Reinhardt, that's about as good as you're going to get for the triage of tanks. So I would love to see that. Okay, moving on to that, Wrecking Ball. So this is the big one. So the big thing we have with Wrecking Ball is Wrecking Ball's grappling hook includes a reduced cooldown when not entering ramming speed. So this is Fireball, right? And the ability to retract itself. So we'll talk about the retraction in a second. Basically what this does is if you miss or you mess up the grapple, you get the cooldown back faster. It's not the full cooldown. It's a reduced cooldown. The reason this is really important, though, is not just, oh, it's a Band-Aid in case you made an error. This is more important than that. I was thinking about this on stream yesterday. This actually gives you more counterplay versus crowd control. Because think about what crowd control often does with it. Sleep Dart, Hack, Mag Grenade, Roadhog Hook, etc. What it does is it will cancel the hook. It will put the hook on cooldown, and then after you get crowd control, you don't have a consistent escape. It's not the crowd control necessarily that kills you. It's often what it prevents you from doing, and then it puts the hook on cooldown, and then you can't get out again, right? So what this does is that, like, let's say you use your hook, your grappling hook, and you start to roll, or maybe you don't even roll at all, and then you get crowd controlled, you get the hook back pretty quickly after you're crowd controlled instead of having to wait for the full cooldown. So this is an indirect counterplay to CC, which is, I think, fairly interesting. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how it applies in game, but I think this is going to be a fairly good, like, fairly healthy buff for Ball, and I'm okay with that. The ability to retract with Wrecking Ball is going to be something interesting as well. It basically allows you to position and stage a little bit easier. really, this one is going to take a lot of time to test to see like what are the ramifications of this. And along that point here, you've probably heard about the adaptive shields change, which means that you can press the adaptive shields button again to spread some of your health to nearby allies. Now, the obvious thing here is that like, oh, we can help my teammates and like protect my teammates and I'll lose my HP and that's great and all. But this is probably going to be more important about helping people that are aggressing with you. The flankers, divers, DPS supports that are going in aggressively with you, you lose some of your health, but they gain health up to 75 over health per ally, which, guys, that's a lot. That is a lot of HP proportionally. Now, it's not quite as much as it used to be, considering that proportionally HP pools have grown, but this is a really, really big deal to the point where it actually could be kind of broken. The reason why I'm reserving judgment on this one is the fact that this is introducing dynamics to an ability so that there's choice with how you use your adaptive shields. It doesn't just do the same thing. There's actually like multiple ways to use it now. But crucially, there's also a penalty for using it. It's not just, oh, you give free overhealth. You lose the health yourself. So it could be a mistake to use it, and you're going to be costing your own survivability at the expense of your teammates. Now, does that mean that it won't still be a strong ability? Maybe broken when combined with some of the other things? Maybe. But again, when we're looking about introducing not necessarily reworks, but new levels and layers, whether it's increasing skill floors or increasing skill ceilings or just making the character more intuitive to play, dynamics is what we're looking for. Choice, not just you use the ability defensively, you use the ability offensively. It's like you can choose, and there's costs and benefits about each one, and you have to kind of discuss or think about what makes the most sense. And both of these changes really are really quite good at that. By both these changes, I mean specifically the overhealth, and I guess to an extent using the grapple for retraction. But there's a choice that you have to make about whether that's what you want to do with the cooldown. And so again, these are definitely wrecking ball buffs for sure, 100%. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But I'm a fan of the way that the direction they're going. I am a little bit concerned about the quantity of overhealth. In general, AoE sustain things can be a little bit tricky, so we'll need to keep an eye on how this is executed. But I think that there's enough dynamics with this ability that there could be a lot of tweaks here without totally trashing the ability overall. Okay, anyway. Damage heroes will be some light adjustments for Sombra and Tracer. Let's talk about these. Sombra virus damage is taking a small hit in the damage over time from 100 to 90 since the ability now has more upfront burst. Fine. I would have preferred more tweaks to EMP instead of the virus. I think Sombra's EMP is still way too strong. I've been very vocal about that, but you guys have heard me say that a million times. Tracer has been quite strong since Season 9 changes. She's one of the least touched heroes in Overwatch history. Her kit flows spectacularly well. I agree. I am a Tracer apologist. I think that she's probably almost certainly a little bit overtuned right now, but there isn't another character in the DPS cast that is better to be overtuned, not just for, because it's honest, good Overwatch, hardworking, high-rank Overwatch, but because it's just fun. Like, the character is not abused in low to mid ranks like so many other DPS characters were if they were also overtuned. Like, what meta is more healthy than a Tracer meta? Even a Cassie meta can be tricky, right? Bastion, no. Widowmaker, no. Hanzo, no. Even Genji can be problematic because of the combo of Nanoblade is almost unstoppable in low to mid ranks, right? Even higher ranks. So what you have is you have a healthy skill curve character that's performing very well, and that's exactly what you want. And so we need to be very careful with these tweaks. But the good news is I think the way that they communicate these tweaks, we're looking for some light changes for her right now. And that's the adjective that we need here. We don't need any major tweaks. She may be a little bit overtuned, but we don't want to take her out of the meta, just maybe not quite so dominant. And I think it's definitely fair. I think our goal should be to bump more characters to Tracer's level, if possible, rather than bringing Tracer down. But I do think the Tracer is probably a little bit overtuned. The question here is the terminology here, making her slightly more punishable. I don't know what that means. I hope it doesn't necessarily mean tweaks to blinks and recall. I hope it doesn't necessarily make any major tweaks to her hitbox. I think those are mostly fine and requires more precision. I'm not sure what this means either. Maybe I'm assuming this is going to be more fall off changes. I would prefer if they just basically tweak some of the like damage numbers by 0.5 or fall off by this or tweak. Like, I think if you're going to tweak anything with Tracer, you don't really want to touch her kit. You want to tweak the damage numbers because that's historically been the most effective way of putting Tracer in her right spot. And now that we're actually comfortable with making 0.5 an actual damage number, before they did not want to do 0.5 at 7 or 8 or 9, right? I think that there's going to be a lot of precision with this. Okay, moving on to support. We're looking for shifts in Moira, Lucian, Illari. That means taking power from one part of the kit and funneling it to another. That sounds great. We'd love to hear that. Obviously, I've been a big Moira and Illari hater. There's a lot of discussion about, like, I think those characters are too one-dimensional. Their skill floor is awkward. Illari really is just a turret. Her secondary fire is situational. Her pylon is dulled. Her playstyle is really the most one-dimensional of, I think, any support in all of Overwatch 2. She's not a very good healing tank. She's not, at least consistently, she's not very good at frontline pressure. Her pylon doesn't have a lot of dynamics. Her mobility is surprisingly limited. I'm an Illari hater. Anyway, somewhat to maintain the overall power budget of the hero, Illari, for example, is to receive a slight nerf to her primary fire recovery time, 0.2 to 0.25 seconds. So a 25% increase in the amount of time it takes to fully charge her solar rifle to full. But giving more power back to her secondary fire heal to increase its HPS from 105 to 115. I don't like this change. Now, let me be very clear. I've clarified this for a reason. I am an Illari hater. I don't like the character. This is a nerf to Illari, and this is a significant nerf to Illari. Increasing the HPS is definitely like, hey, that's nice and all, but this is not going to be near as tangible as the slower fire rate. You're going to feel this a lot more, and this is going to feel a lot worse. The character is going to feel worse. But this is not the right change. Like, I know I have my own bias in not liking Illari, but this is not the direction you want to go. This is the aspect of the character that is what makes the character fun and enjoyable. This is not the aspect of the character that makes her fun and enjoyable. Now, I don't know what you would tweak Illari. I think you'd have to look into some overclock. I actually talked about this in the April Fool's video just the other day, so you might want to check that one out. But like, what does Illari need? Is it more dynamics with pylon? Do we need to lean more into opening up her mobility options or making her a more dynamic and interesting character to play? This is not only not going to do that, but this is going to make the character actively feel more clunky. And I think that's the wrong direction with this character. I think this charge time with Illari is already feeling a little bit awkward as it is, as my cats are freaking out. Anyway, and this is not going to be a big deal. Like, we don't need higher single target healing. It's already more than enough. And I don't get this change. It's not so much that this change is going to be trash the game. It's going to be guarantee ruin the meta. It's kind of harmless outside, unless you're an Illari main. If you're an Illari main, I feel sorry for you. But it's just why, right? Like, as good as the development team has done up to this point, recently especially, I've really loved a lot of the changes. This one is just kind of like a real question mark for me. Like, what's the purpose? What's the long-term goal here? Sometimes this feels like another one of those just shifting numbers just for the sake of shifting numbers. And this is not a number. This is not the direction we need to go with shifting numbers. I think the one thing that maybe they're thinking is that the character is becoming a little bit too spammy, and they want to like put more power into charging up your weapon and firing again. But without some other form of communication on this front and having a change besides increasing your HPS, I don't like this. Some light buffs for Light Weaver as we continue to evaluate where healthy power can be injected into his kit. I love the terminology, the way that they phrase that. Again, where healthy power can be injected into his kit, not just flat buffs. And that's kind of like the same kind of mindset that I wish that they had applied to Illari as well. But at least the phrasing there is good. Moira Lucia, we don't really have any information about what's changing, so we'll have to wait and see. But that's mostly it for this section. So mixed bag, I think mostly positive. I'm healthily, cautiously positive about what they've done with the Wrecking Ball stuff. Obviously, the Junker Queen and Rein is good. I think the Venture stuff is fine. Would like to see more quality of life. The support stuff is definitely a mixed bag. Some of it's uncommunicated. We'll have to wait and see. And then the Flanker stuff is more of it also. We need to wait and see. I'm a little bit concerned about the Tracer stuff, but it seems reasonable. Now let's talk about the Defense Matrix thing. So there's a lot to unpack here. Most of what they put in the video, if you haven't seen the video on Play Overwatch, is pretty much straightforward, but I'll run through and just give you a couple of my ideas here. Playing competitive with friends, basically the long story short here, without rehashing the same stuff that's already been communicated, is there's going to be wide groups to where you can play with really any SR. It just means that you're going to be waiting in lobbies for a long time. This is more of like, it's free value. It's probably not something that's going to be super popular because how many times will a Grandmaster player want to really queue up with a Bronze player? The crucial thing to note is that this is not really going to affect your SR that much. The wider the group, the less SR you're going to gain or lose, because obviously that could be exploited in other ways. So whatever. Update, there's harsher lever penalties. Again, I'll let you guys look at the information more in detail on your own. My opinion is this is fine. I've been a big proponent of even having, a lot of people were like, not a big fan of the unranked mode lever penalties, but I disagree. I think if it's a fun game mode, you need to be punishing people for leaving the game. Because one lever really ruins the game mode, even if it is an unranked mode, because if it's for fun, then you need to finish the game mode. It's having a casual game mode doesn't mean that you're not allowed to play at all. It's the equivalent of like, we're just playing pickup basketball, guys, but bro, you're not even dribbling the ball. You're just running down the court. Like, you at least have to follow some sort of structure because it actively harms the fun of other people. I don't think that's a good excuse. Regardless, cool. Look into it more on your own, form your own opinions. Expanding streamer project. Basically, the TLDR of this, again, the video does a much better job of this than this little developer blog here. But basically, it's going to allow it to be universal. If you activate the streamer, you will have an anonymity for anyone in your game. It's not just, oh, people watching my stream won't know who I am. People in my lobby won't know who I am. It will be randomized entirely. So it allows a little bit more anonymity, goodness gracious. And the reason why this is important is this is not generally a big deal for low to mid ranks, generally because the community is so large at that point in time that you're not likely to play versus the same people over and over again. But you need to be taking small steps to make streamers happy. I know this sounds corny. You guys, the plats out there, like, you need to make streamers happy. I don't care. I don't really play the game that much. And I've never really had a problem with stream snipers, but unhappy streamers creates an unhappy community because they're figureheads of the community. So if people are struggling with the lack of streamer mode and getting upset, they're going to create an frustrated, unhealthy, angry environment. And as a community, it is in your best interest to make the streamers reasonably happy with things like this, because that's going to create a culture of people that are going to enjoy and want to play the game, and no dead game, bruh. So this is not that relevant for most of you guys, but it is a good news for you for the overall culture, the environment, and the health of the game moving forward. So it's fine. It's great. Expanding avoided teammate. This is pretty cool to know. There's a tier list of avoided teammate, and you can now avoid 10 people, and you can keep them avoided. You can pen them. So you can literally this guy sucks. This is going to be Spilo at the top here, right? And he will be the #1 avoided person permanently 24/7. Now, one thing that Gavin did say is that, especially for higher ranked players where the player pool is a little bit smaller, avoid is not going to be locked permanent. In other words, they might struggle if you have 10 players, like you avoid 10 support players and you're playing in top 500. The game might struggle to make a lobby if you've avoided 10 support players. So it's going to prioritize in keeping the top of the list truly avoided, but you might occasionally get some of the ones at the bottom of the list in your game. So overall, this is a really cool change. I mean, the level of, I can't even imagine the mathematics put into this from Gavin and the other crew behind the matchmaker. So big shout out to them. This must have been super, super intense, but this is really, really cool, really, really exciting. And even this is going to be a powerful even for the low to mid rank players, because I don't think your player pool is big enough. This is like a little bit of a guarantee that you don't get that crappy Roadhog one trick named Spilo on your team. Mitigating disruptive chat, mostly little details here about spectator chat, making it easier to report, avoiding basically the level 0. If you get punished or you get banned or suspended, you're a level 0 endorsement. And so not allowing those people to immediately start harassing and insulting faster again. And then also introducing finally the player surveys here so that occasionally you will be asked to give feedback. And I think this is a cool change. I think one of the biggest things that Overwatch really struggled with the old guard, going back to Jeff Kaplan, Jeff Goodman, and so on, was that there was a real lack of feedback avenue. There was no feedback. There was not a lot of participation with content creators. There wasn't a lot of discussion and communication with the community as a whole. And there were certainly no surveys, right? It was pretty isolated, pretty top heavy. And obviously when you're working with a game company, it can be very difficult to get good feedback from people. Like, how do you get good feedback without just exposing yourself to a lot of harassment? I mean, you even look at whenever Alec Dawson tweets, and there's just at least half a dozen Neanderthals every single time in one of his tweets. But regardless, you do need feedback. And so finding ways to kind of manage that, I think, is really important. And hopefully this is going to help them out with doing that. So anyway, overall, a relatively mixed bag, but I think definitely the second half of things are super, super exciting. And overall, like I said, I really am positive about the direction of many of the ways that this game is going. And I'm curious to see exactly how this Wrecking Ball, along with the other things, are going to feel next week. I'll see you guys next week. Waiting for the recording to finish.